преводи ще дойдат малко по-късно, така че ще ги видим утре. И от името на всички българи, присъстващи в тази зала, искам да ги приветствам на територията на нашата страна, една от най-старите държави в Европа. И София, може би също един от най-старите градове в Европа. Ако имат възможност, могат да посетят руините, които са се запазили. За да се похвалим, може да кажем, че най-старите останки от селища са 5000 години преди Христа, т.е. на повече от 7000 години. И не знаем как са разрешавали трудовите спорове по време на пелазгите, траките, славяните и старите българи. Но за щастие или за съжаление трябва да знаем как се разрешават трудовите спорове сега. И нашият проект е насочен именно към това, да споделиме опита на трите държави. Вероятно английският опит е най-богатия, най-добре развитие, затова с внимание ще изслушаме нашите английски колеги, нашите британски колеги, да ни разкажат за алтернативните методи за решаване на трудовите спорове, за това как те обучават своите колеги да бъдат посредници, арбитри в такива трудови спорове. И за да не бъда прекалено многословен, а и трябва да разбереме всички най-накрая за какво е този проект, госпожа Джуди Джексън ще ни разкаже за него.
Thanks very much, Dimo, for that introduction. I'd also like to welcome everybody to our event here in Sofia. It's the first time that the General Federation of Trade Unions in the UK has been involved in a project like this, and it's the first time that we've organised anything on an international basis. So you can't believe how relieved I was when I saw people from Bulgaria and from Poland and other places coming into the room this evening. I'm really pleased, and I'm really glad that you've all taken the time to come along. And I'd like to obviously give special thanks to Dima, who has been organising everything on the ground in Bulgaria for the past year of the project. Just very quickly, it's only a very short session this evening, but we'd like to tell you just a little bit about the project itself and a little bit about the event. We came up with the idea of looking at dispute resolution as a topic about 18 months ago. It seemed to be something that we in the GFTU in the UK hadn't really dealt with very much. There was a lot of new ideas about the theory around dispute resolution. And we thought it would be a good idea to put a pitch to the European Commission to see if they thought the same. Luckily, they did, and they gave us just over €100,000 to progress this project with our partners at the Balkan Institute, Solidarność in Poland, and also we did have an original French partner who unfortunately had to drop out partway through in Toulouse in France. The work has been quite concentrated in terms of developing two main strands. One is a research strand, which one of our colleagues, English Job, will talk to you about shortly. And the other is training materials and developing training materials that can be transferred into all the partner countries, and also will find a wider audience via other partners. That training will look at various aspects of alternative dispute resolution on a practitioner basis, looking at people how they can do it themselves, what they can do in the workplace, why it would be good in the workplace, and the benefits that that kind of ideas will bring. We are at the end of the project now. There's only a few more weeks to run, and this is really the last part of it. And we're just going to go on with my colleague now, Ian Mambold, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the project in detail and about other things that we're going to cover in the next couple of days.
Okay, thanks Judith. Can I first of all just welcome you all to this event. When the GFTU submitted the funding proposal for this project in early 2010, we had no idea whether we'd be successful in getting the money from the European Commission. We were, and what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about the basis of our proposal, the objectives, and then in a moment to hand over to Ian Fitzgerald, who started the first phase of the project, which was effectively a piece of research to identify good practice on alternative dispute resolution in the UK. I have some slides I'm going to work through, and I apologise to colleagues from Bulgaria. I only finished those yesterday, so they've not been translated, so I'll speak slowly at that point, just to allow the translators to follow what I'm saying. The most important thing to say at the outset is that although, as Judith said, we'd decided on a project that related to alternative dispute resolution, the background to the funding that was available at the time from the European Commission was very much located within the global economic crisis. So the key themes that the European Commission were interested in were largely around ways to enhance economic stability within businesses, improve social dialogue between employers and social actors like trade unions, and overall limit the way in which workplace disputes can sometimes end up in formal industrial action or in judicial intervention. By that we mean disputes that end up in the courts. So the overall thrust was to ensure that employers and trade unions had a package of materials on methods to improve approaches to mediation, conciliation and arbitration. Generally the concepts within alternative dispute resolution. And as the 3 points at the bottom of the slide say, the overall emphasis was to end with a suite of training materials, which John Sterling will launch tomorrow, that ultimately supported the role of trade unions working with employers to reduce the extent to which industrial disputes led to quite significant industrial relations difficulties within the workplace, or spilled over into industrial action, or ended up in the need for third-party resolution, particularly through legal intervention. So we had some very clear objectives within the project overall. And just as a note on those 3 objectives, we started off with the view that we needed to have a mapping exercise, essentially, of what ADR looked like in practice across the European Union. And that's where we decided to commission Ian Fitzgerald to undertake that piece of research, because it was on the basis of the case studies that Ian generated that we then moved on to have a series of roundtable exercises in each country. The idea of the roundtables, I'll talk about this later on this evening, was to identify the scope for introducing alternative dispute resolution as a standard practice within workplaces and as a discussion in the roundtables between trade unions and employers. The end point of the project was that we asked John Sterling from the University of Northumbria to develop a package of training materials that incorporated elements of the research, that was incorporated elements of the case studies that could be used in very practical situations, either by trade unions or by employers, or preferably jointly between trade unions and employers. I say that last point because a lot of the work that the GFTU does is very much based on enhancing partnership between trade unions and employers. So this project very much fits in with that overall thrust of the GFTU. I want to talk a little bit more about the roundtable activity that occurred in the UK, but what I'd like to do at this stage is just hand over to Ian Fitzgerald from the University of Northumbria, just to talk a little bit more about the very first stage of the project, which was very much focusing on research around ADR practice across the European Union.
Thanks very much, Ian. There's something I've written that should be in your pack, so all I'm going to do is talk to that for around 5 minutes. What I would say is there's 2 pieces of key research that's been recently undertaken by Eurofound in Dublin, which looks across Europe at ADR, and also by ACAS and the Working Lives Institute, and those are referenced in there. What I'd say, coming out of this research, what that showed is that ADR is complex. This doesn't surprise us. Given industrial relations systems in Europe, it's very difficult to actually look at ADR and say that this is the same in different countries. There are different traditions, there are different cultures. For example, in the partner country here in Bulgaria, there's a Mediation Act which was brought in 2004 and 2006. But as far as I understand it, most individual or most dispute resolution now goes through collective agreement, it goes through collective. And individual dispute resolution is not that strong. There's also a National Institute for Conciliation and Arbitration, but again, it was identified that this relates to the railways. There's a real problem with individual disputes actually getting held up in the legal system. And there's talk about the dispute resolutions procedures need to be established so that Bulgaria can start looking at this in an individual way. If we turn to Poland, one of the key areas is trust, and that won't surprise anyone if they're from Poland, trust of institutions. So mediation and arbitration are used on a regular basis, again for collective bargaining, but not on an individual level. ADR is very new to Poland. There's a widespread, as I say, mistrust of dispute resolution, and it often goes through the courts. So the courts are trusted, but other institutions are not. Social partners, from a questionnaire undertaken by Solidarność, the partner, social partners were looking to develop dispute resolution between the collective stage, etc. And that's to be seen in the future. In the UK, it's well established, and ACAS, I think we'll talk about this tomorrow, and ACAS is a conciliation and arbitration service that is provided or funded by government. And I think they're a very important body. In the UK, for example, often individual dispute resolution, before it goes to a labour court, it has to go through ACAS. And they're also starting to bring in ACAS a pre-claim conciliation, which I think is very important there. Finally, what I would like to say is just that Purcell in his research identifies 3 distinct forms of ADR, but what he says about this is often it's very difficult, so mediation and conciliation often overlap and are misunderstood. So conciliation, which is no judgment or solution offered by the parties, is used. Mediation is also used for a number of different countries, and this is non-binding recommendations. Arbitration is used, but this, for example, was identified in the UK, but I think there's only something like 10 cases in the UK, and arbitration is binding, but that's very unusual. There's also labour inspectors or ombudsmen, but labour inspectors is perhaps the wrong type of terminology, and what we mean here are experts, and conciliation and arbitration are then used by those experts to help. And